Well, it's that time for understanding exposure therapy right here on our health and wellness feature. And we all want to achieve our goals, but sometimes our goals are on the other side of our fears. Exposure therapy is a highly effective evidence-based cognitive behavioral treatment designed to help individuals confront and overcome fears, anxiety, and phobias in a safe, controlled environment. By gradually increasing exposure of feared stimuli, patients reduce avoiding behaviors and learn that the feared situation is not dangerous. Joining us on the line is Angelah Adeh, who's going to help us understand exposure therapy a bit further. Good morning, Angelah. Thank you so much for joining us here on Out and About.
Good morning, Kitty, and thank you for having me, and I look forward to unpacking this with you.
Absolutely. Let's dive straight in. Explain what exposure therapy is and why it is considered such an effective approach for treating fears such as anxiety and phobias as well.
Well, it's exactly that. So it helps people confront their fears by exposing them to that fear. But it's very important that it's done in a safe and controlled environment. So as you mentioned, it can be for anxiety and phobias, but also consider things like PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorders, things like that. So okay, let me give you an example. If a person was scared of spiders, exposure therapy might involve gradually exposing them to the spider. Now, that might sound scary at first, but starting with just talking about spiders or looking at pictures of spiders is really maybe the best way. Then maybe observing a spider in a jar from a distance and eventually looking at or even holding a spider. That's the process. So that the idea is that by facing the fear of repeatedly in a controlled way, this person learns to manage their reactions and they feel less afraid over time. It's a sort of a training your mind to see that fear is less threatening, or to cope with it better. Either way, yeah.
That sounds quite scary. What is the turnaround time for a person to get, if you're arachnophobic, what is the turnaround time for that, for exposure therapy to work?
Yeah, the duration of exposure therapy can vary depending upon the severity of the issue and the particular client's progress. But typically it takes like 8 to 12 sessions, but it sometimes takes longer, sometimes takes shorter. And so success is often measured by a reaction to fear, so you can see that there's a reduction in it,
Right.
or the anxiety symptoms are reduced. And so this is an increase in the person's ability to cope and with their fears or triggers. And so that is identifiable and notable. But again, very controlled, very slow, working at someone else's pace. Yes.
I guess in the spirit of the fact that everything takes time, hey, one has to be very patient and slowly does it. Eventually you'll get the results. Many people naturally avoid things they fear. Why is avoidance often counterproductive, and how does exposure therapy help break that cycle?
I would say that the natural inclination of most human beings is to survive. So it's a survival mechanism. Fear is there to serve us, it's there to warn us and to keep us safe. So in the face of something that we have had prior experience of, or we have heard someone else had prior experience of, and in our minds, our survival techniques start to take over, then that's when that fear starts to kick in. When it's disproportionate to the actual situation, it can go on to affect our quality of life. And when we say disproportionate, meaning that we have used a blanket umbrella of an experience and blanketed all experiences. All dogs are dangerous. All people who have done something to me are dangerous. So when we start to blanket this experience and we start to have an impact on our quality of life, that's a good indicator.
So this might be a bit of a juxtaposition in the way I ask this question, because sometimes they say, let fear be the drive to your goals. When it comes to exposure therapy, Now, is there a way that fear can allow you to reach your goal in terms of healing and overcoming that fear? I don't know if that makes sense because, sometimes,
Yeah,
fear can drive you to be better at something. Do you know what I mean? But when it comes to therapy, because I know it's very, very sensitive, is there a way that the two can coincide?
I would say we look at fear, and then I'm going to look at the definition of courage.
Right.
Courage is feeling fear, but doing it anyway, right? So, in that sense, depending upon the nature of the situation and how we are driven to attend to that situation, is how we can use fear. Fear, in and of itself, is a brilliant emotion. It's there to help keep us safe, it's there to help us and guide us through paths. We're still alive right now, so obviously, on some level, people interpret the fear as working for them. But again, that space of, if we are not patient with ourselves, if we are not considerate of ourselves, we can drive ourselves into situations. Take, for instance, public speaking. There's often a fear of public speaking. That is something that if you just throw yourself into it, you can easily be in front of people, cameras, or otherwise, and just go numb. Just go numb. And then it becomes a confirmatory experience that you can't do something.
Like a stage fright.
Versus, right, 100%. But if you had acknowledged that you're feeling fear and then took it in small little pieces, like we discussed with the exposures therapy, like we discussed with the spider, on maybe just looking at pictures of spiders. So just looking at pictures of someone doing public speaking and learn the dynamics of what it takes. And one then acclimates, one then eases into the process of what it means to do public speaking, then the experience will not be the same as if you just threw yourself and ignored your fear
Absolutely.
symbols.
You know what's a grave concern for me? And one thing that you've been stressing a lot about exposure therapy, that it's done in a safe and controlled environment. Now, what we've been
Yes,
seeing, I mean, social media can have a good and a bad effect on outcomes, right? And what we see
right.
now is that people are trying to do it on their own. Is it dangerous that people, are in pursuit of doing exposure therapy on their own without the right supervision?
I think there is a lot of information out there, and people are their best judge, because even in therapy, we are guided with the client's needs. So we ourselves don't push people, we walk next to people on this journey. It can be very dangerous to push people past their needs. Now, I would say that if you have a friend helping you, that might be a bit dangerous. But you yourself, if you are reflecting and have some techniques and look at how, again, maybe depends on the severity of the issue as well and how dangerous the issue is. But each one of us have a life to live, and we are the best judges on whether we should be with a qualified therapist, or if the issue is not so threatening, then we can try it on our own. So it's a very personal decision.
Now, exposure therapy sounds very intimidating to some people and also to me, the more we speak about it. How do psychologists ensure that the process happens in a safe and controlled way for patients?
Well, first of all, we take extensive history. And the safety and the ethics of the situation are actually crucial. So I always start with a thorough assessment, and then I like to build trust. And then I go at the client's pace, not my pace. So we create a clear plan together, and we use informed consent, and we include regular check-ins to monitor emotional safety. And we never push beyond what they can handle. That's important.
Yeah, because I guess everybody goes at their own pace. Hey, so that's very comforting to know that. Now, what does the process of gradual exposure actually look like in a practice? Can you walk us through how someone might move step by step from fear to utter confidence?
Okay. Well, let's see. A person comes into office, they're extremely nervous. We talk through the history, like I said before, and we actually just really work on becoming comfortable with the therapist because you don't even know if you trust this person, you don't know their qualifications. Preferably, you would have done that research before you decided to make the appointment with the person. That's preferable. You want to look for a qualified therapist, number one, and you would find that out by a person who's registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa or any other health professions council, depending upon which country you're in. But they should be registered, which means they are trained specifically for this. And then secondly, you get to know the person, you sit together, you talk through their goals, you talk through their history on what had happened, what was the first encounter, when did they notice when this first started, and maybe a little bit again a history of what did this look like and how has this been affecting their life. And then a consultation maybe on if there was one small thing that they think that they could do to attend to the issue, one small thing, not a big thing, a small thing, small thing like looking at a picture of a spider. Do they think that they could handle looking at a picture of a spider? We start there. If it's not even there at a picture, then we would maybe start with something like words. Can they write the word spider? You know? Can they write about maybe the experience of the spider? So we find the smallest part for them to enter into the doorway, for them to start trusting that this is something that they can actually work on.
This is very riveting. And for someone, just to wrap things up, for someone listening who realizes their goals might be on the other side of fear, what is the first step they can take towards confronting those fears in a healthy manner?
I would say it's going to sound strange, but just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. Start focusing on the now, because often we can feel ungrounded. And part of the process of just grounding yourself in the present moment, in now, a state of almost presence and forgiveness for the fear that you are experiencing that may not be substantiated by the actual real world examples. Bringing yourself back to a moment where you actually feel in control can be the biggest moment towards moving on to achieve your goals.
I think what sticks true to me about any situation or any problems that we encounter, I think the first step to dealing with these problems is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement, acceptance, and then deal with it. So for me, that is something very, very important that you've mentioned. Angelah, for someone who wants to use your services, where do they go?
www.adcp.coza. That's Angelah Adeh, clinical psychologist, adcp.coza. Fill out the website. I'm more than happy to help. Passionate about mental health, and may we bring it to our brothers and sisters across the continent.
Absolutely, because people are suffering out there. Thank you so much, Angelah, for making the time to chat to us here on Channel Africa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that was Angelah Adeh, and listen, she chats to us about exposure therapy. There are so many things that have got to do with exposure therapy that really, really does help people and their inner fears. And now you go from, confronting your inner fears to absolute confidence. And that's what we want for people mentally and otherwise to, in light of you mental health, wellness, for just your general health. So we appreciate people like Angelah doing remarkable work in helping people. We'll be back in just a moment, exactly 10:35, and still to come your way is Vibe Check and Glide Through the Gallery. Isn't that gorgeous? We'll be back in a moment.
Stay tuned to Channel Africa.